Welcome to the Academy of General Dentistry podcast series featuring Dr. George Schmidt. Each episode features experts in the field of dentistry who share insights and inspiration to help you succeed. Let's get started.
Hey, welcome back, everyone. We've got a fantastic show for you today as we're going to talk a little bit about some restorative dentistry with my guest, Dr. David Clark. David, how are you?
Good. I'm excited to be here. I've been talking for 9 straight days, so I have a little bit of a raspy voice, which makes me extra cool. So I'm just kidding. So
Absolutely. That's good stuff. And we're really looking forward to it. So Dr. David Clark is the inventor of the Bioclear method in his quest to bring composite dentistry out of the 19th century. Dr. Clark redefined the way we think about restorative dentistry by developing modern systems and methods for cavity preparations, special matrices, wedges, separators, bonding, restorative and polishing materials, and methods. His injection molding technique has created a third modality with monolithic restorations. Dr. Clark founded the Bioclear Clinic and is the director of the Bioclear Learning Centers International. He founded the Academy of Microscope Enhanced Dentistry and is on the editorial board for several journals and has lectured in 20 different countries. He holds several U.S. patents integral to the Bioclear method and matrix system. And, I guess your philosophy, I think, is saying, hey, you know what, old school dentistry, that's not what we should be doing. We should be more conservative in every way and stop grinding down teeth and things that don't need to be treated. And we should be much more kind to the tooth structure. And to your credit, you adopted this philosophy and you created a center up in Tacoma, Washington, I think, and you built a curriculum and a pathway for folks to go down and really enjoy this type of dentistry, the way you see it. So let me ask you just right off the top, what exactly is the Bioclear method?
okay. So unfortunately, we're like you go through Utah and you go through the through the Grand Canyon. You have the strata of all these rock formations. Okay, well, dentistry is built on all the strata of history and rock formations where nothing ever got reinvented. So let's back up and find what is dentistry based off when it comes to restorative dentistry. Now, when it comes to implants and it comes to crown and bridge, it's all been kind of reinvented. So we kind of threw away the past, right? We really threw away the past when we went to implants, for example. But with restorative dentistry, we have this strata of all these rock formations from the Neolithic period or whatever. And so let's kind of describe why we are where we are. So in 1890, G.V. Black invented this cavity preparation. We made these boxy preparations. He advocated that we had to remove all decay and we have these clean margins, okay? So dental schools have been teaching this boxy, retentive cavity preparation, extension for prevention. And frankly, George, this is really interesting. G.V. Black, there was no engineering in the time of G.V. Black. There was barely electricity in his era. They didn't understand the concept of cyclic fatigue or strain or stress or bending or brittle materials. There was no understanding back then. So G.V. Black built wood carpentry preparations. It's called a mortise and tenon. So they did the dovetail to lock the amalgam into the restoration. It was a perfect woodworking joint. But when I talk to structural engineers, they say, hey, David, you're not working on cabinets, okay? This ain't wood. There's no grain structure. So when you cut these preparations into brittle material and you bend the material and it bends over time, it creates horrific problems. Cracked and fractured teeth are the number 3 cause of tooth loss in industrialized nations, and it's because we're cutting the wrong hole. But the problem is we switched slowly from amalgam to composite in the anterior. And then in the anterior, we've kind of gotten away from doing sort of like standardized preps. In the anterior, you remove decay, you put a bevel on it, you kind of wrap the tooth with composite, and off you go. So anterior composites do okay. But in the back of the mouth, the dental schools never changed their prep. So most dental schools are still teaching a G.V. Black retentive cavity preparation, which is the worst thing that we can do. So when I'm working with dental schools, they get excited about the matrix, but then the school, which I won't mention, said, David, don't talk to our undergraduate students about a new preparation. We have to teach them a G.V. Black prep because that's what the boards make us teach, which is actually wag the dog. The boards are supposed to teach what's done in the community. But the problem is there's a Venn diagram. George, there's a Venn diagram. There's the prep, it's the material, it's how you inject it, how you matrix, and most importantly, George, here's what the Bioclear method is about. Bioclear goes around the tooth and not in the tooth. We're able to splint crack teeth. We're able to put teeth into compression by going around the tooth and creating these zones of compression. So the prep is everything. But the problem with dental schools is they're using a GV, they're using a top-of-mar matrix. They think they have to have a margin. They think they have to create mechanical retention. So they're never, I may be dead and gone 100 years before they create the Clark Class 2 cavity preparations that allow the composite to go around the tooth with compression at what we call the primary strike point. Now, George, I don't know how old you are, but I went to dental school 142 years ago. We loved gold, okay? And Dr. Dick Tucker reinvented the way we do gold. Dr. Dick Tucker was the guy in gold. You ever heard of him?
Absolutely. Yeah. He sure
Nice,
was the guy.
okay?
Yeah.
He radicalized gold preparations. He was radical at his time. He made the gold go around the tooth and hug the tooth. So when I started redesigning composite preparations, I just thought this is a mess. And I lecture, my most popular lecture is about cracked teeth, why teeth crack. It sells out every time. I did it in Texas. I had 800 people in the room. It's a mystery to us.
Wow.
And so as I began to redesign the Class 2 to strengthen the tooth rather than weaken it and maximize the qualities of composite, I had a little epiphany. A light went off in my head and I said, I'm going to cut a Dick Tucker gold ensconcement cavity preparation. And he's the original inventor of the calla lily shape. Now, if you can't see my hands, I'm doing this beautiful thing. So we don't have military cavity preps with boxes and bevels. The entire prep for Dick Tucker gold was flared. And why did Dick Tucker flare the gold? Because he knew that the gold foil was the ultimate margin. He wanted to disc the gold to seal the gingival. And so when his gold went around the tooth, when you bite on his gold margins, the margins never open up. But if you do gold inlays in dental school, and if you dist it too much, you'd open up a margin, you cement margin. Gold didn't last any longer than amalgam. In fact, worse outcomes if you didn't flare the prep. So here's the deal. It's a Venn diagram. You have to change, George, everything. And you have to change it all at once. So people want to do a modern prep, then use a metal matrix. Or they want to use this Bioclear matrix and cut an old-fashioned prep. Or they don't want to remove biofilm. This is a blaster. It snaps on your quick disconnect, and we have to blast away all the biofilm on the outside of the tooth, because if we don't, the composite just falls off. And we're not prepping the whole tooth. So this whole concept of removing biofilm from the infinity edge, there's 5 points to the Venn diagram. And so what happens is people pick up 1 or 2 points of the Venn diagram, and it doesn't get better. So for dental school to adopt not just getting rid of retentive cavity preparations, but injection molding, no more hand spackling, no more marginating, everything's infinity edge, everything's injection molded, and we injection mold with heat and pressure. So we've got this industrial heater that heats the composite, because I'm not going in the tooth, George, I'm going around. And when we go around, we get rid of all the polymerization shrinkage problems with C-factor. It fixes everything. But here's the rub, and here's why I'm losing my hair. Because you got to change everything all at once. It doesn't make sense to fix one of those 5 pillars. So at a certain point, we built the learning center here so people could just jump in, and we just basically put their brain on rinse cycle and wash out all those old concepts. Because this class in here, every time it's like, well, we don't layer anymore. No, we don't do full caries removal anymore. Well, we don't have the word margin anymore. And then you have to kind of walk everybody through that. So we do total immersion here at the Learning Center because it's hard to walk away from the old world.
I'm glad you brought that up, because you're absolutely right. Especially in the dental schools, it's really hard to move that. And I'm so happy that you've sort of grabbed the torch and you're leading the charge there. And I think you kind of touched on it, but what was the tipping point where you said, you know what, this GV black stuff isn't working for me. I gotta go and do something else. Was there a tipping point?
Here's what gave me a push. Okay. I got an operating microscope. See this thing? I got an operating microscope 30 years ago. Nobody had a microscope back then. Okay. I used this for endo. I got these because I love endo, right? Because there were a handful of endodontists that had microscopes. And endodontists in the beginning were really resistant to microscopes. We fought a huge war to get endodontists to use microscopes. And now it's, standard. So I had this microscope, George. I'm thinking, I paid for this stupid thing. I'm going to use it to do operative. And as I started doing operative dentistry under microscope, there was me and 5 other folks doing it. I watched the composite literally shrink away from the margins. I watched cracks develop over time under the operating microscope, and this thing pushed me to walk away from mainstream dentistry because I was seeing stuff that nobody else saw. Now, this is really cool, George. This is cool. I used to talk a lot about microscopes. I don't talk about it anymore because a lot of people won't get them. Like, fine. If you don't want a microscope, it's more beer for me, okay? I don't care. Get a microscope or don't. The guy that originally built the microscope, this is a cool story. Anton van Leeuwenhoek, who was a Dutch guy. He got a microscope and he was good at grinding glass. He wanted to figure out, because he was buying silk from China, he wanted to find out if they were ripping him off. So he built unbelievable compound microscopes to count the thread count in the silk to make sure he wasn't getting ripped off.
Wow.
And he built this microscope, Anton van Leeuwenhoek. And then he looks under the microscope. He discovered bacteria. He's the father of microbiology.
I didn't know that.
A guy selling curtains. And the intelligentsia of the day, all the medical doctors of the time, when he came up and said, oh, by the way, there's this thing called bacteria, they scoffed at him. Oh, you're an idiot. You're Dutch and you sell curtains. You don't know squat. So it felt a little bit like Anton van Leeuwenhoek, the first guy that discovered the secret of life. He discovered the secret of life, sperm, that they were actually little critters that floated around. I mean, this guy discovered, he's one of the most important people that ever lived, total accidental tourist to medicine, but he was curious. He had a microscope. So, and for that same reason, George, I looked under the microscope. All my gold looked good. My amalgams looked good. All my composites looked like crap. Nobody told me anything that made any sense to me to make it better because it just looked the same. So using operating microscope at 20 power all day kind of humbled me and helped me be brave enough to walk out and redesign everything without any help. Now, all these new cavity preparations, this whole monolithic injection molding thing, 3M funded millions of dollars of research to say, you know what? This is actually better. We've done finite element analysis, the preps and the polymerization shrinkage. Everything we're doing with the Bioclear method has been validated in 3M studies. I'm really grateful that they funded this to say, you know what? It's not crazy.
Yeah, I can completely relate to that because, when I went from doing analog dentistry to digital dentistry and started scanning, my crown preps, and I looked at that and you can blow it up. You're like, oh my God, look at that prep. So, yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned so many things here. I'm not quite sure where to start, but I do want to start at the beginning, I guess. So
Welcome
the
to my
prep,
world. Welcome
yeah,
to my
exactly.
world.
So let's start with the prep. So the calla lily prep, it's basically, I'm assuming is it similar to a slab prep? No extension for prevention, no GV black. So for the folks that can't see that, it's sort of a rounded, very rounded, flowing, circular type prep.
Right. And it basically, the entire prep is a calla lily. Everyone know the calla lily flower. It has a gradual transition between vertical and horizontal. A slot prep is 100% vertical. And vertical preps are the worst thing you could ever cut. So it's not a slot prep. Here's what we do, George. You take a diamond burr and you remove caries at the DEJ. And then you flare all the walls so that at the primary strike point, right here on the occlusal, you have 2 millimeters of horizontal component enamel. Because every engineer knows that compression allows you to strengthen a tooth and it keeps a composite from breaking off. When you put compression in a tension joint, I've got two fists coming together. When I put composite in a tension joint and it works like that, it just delaminates it. So here's the problem. Doing retentive dentistry putting adhesive dentistry in a retentive cavity prep with like parallel walls, over time as the tooth bends, the bond strength goes to 0.
Wow.
So if you put composite in a GV black prep, it's essentially white amalgam. And there's studies done in the American Dental Association showing that the rate of cuspal fracturing for a posterior composite class 2 and an amalgam class 2 is the same. In other words, if we cut the standard preps they teach in school, bevel them or not, the tooth is going to break at the exact same rate. So putting composite in a standard cavity preparation provides 0 strengthening of the tooth.
Wow. And so you're basically talking about a bevel on the edge that's going to an infinite bevel, right? Just goes to
And it's
nothing.
not a flat bevel, it's actually a convex bevel because the
Okay.
straightest distance between 2 points is a straight line. So we want to maximize our enamel. If we're going to do that, that's why we actually, SS White is building radius bevel burrs that they're concave. They look like Hershey's Kisses.
Wow.
And they're actually building a new, it's kind of a secret, but I'll tell you anyway, a callally shaped carbide that it's the next iteration of the fissurotomy burr. Because if we don't flare things, we have crappy C factor and we can't really get good adhesion. We want to open up some enamel rods, George. Here's the thing. Porcelain veneers bonded to enamel at 90 degrees. Enamel rods at 90 degrees. We have outcome studies at 20 years with 95% survival. So we know that when we bond to like a whole bunch of enamel rods at 90 degrees to the enamel rod, it lasts forever. But when you have parallel walls, you're only opening up one enamel rod, they flex, it's white amalgam. Yeah. So this is a very radical departure from traditional preps.
What about composites? I mean, what kind of composite are you using for these restorations?
You know, they're all pretty good. Here's the funny thing. Composites are in their adulthood. And here's the other thing. People say, oh, you have to use this composite, that composite. Now, I do use 3M composites, and there are a couple of reasons that I do. But they did a study with CRA and Gordon Zimrell and Christensen, good buddies of mine. Mm-hmm. They compared heliomolar. Okay, that's from the disco days, okay?
Yeah, that's going back.
That was my hair, I remember that. That was my hair, right? So
I think I had hair back then.
Anyway, heliomolar, which is really an old composite, held up about as well as all these modern composites. So there are some advantages to a modern composites, but in reality, the composite is helpful, but one composite is not going to fix the problem. And if you're a composite manufacturer, you say, oh, buy my composite and all your dreams will come true, right? Mm-hmm. That's what they do. The composite is a small piece of a bigger picture, which is how do you inject it? How do you prepare it? How do you injection mold it? How do you design the restoration to maximize the flow and the compression of composite? Now, I do, in the posterior, like to use a bulk fill because layering is bad. Layering is the worst thing you could ever do. And these guys that layer, I mean, it's a cool art form in front teeth, but a lot of it chips, right? But in the back of the mouth, we have no business layering. Oh, by the way, George, up at Boeing, they're building airplanes out of monolithic composite. The new Dreamliner is made out of monolithic composite. And Airbus has one too. So it's not like composite is crap. It's only crap when we layer it and hand spackle it, okay? So every resin thing in the world, whether it's a syringe or whatever, is made from injection molded resin. They inject it with heat and pressure, which is exactly what we do when we injection mold our restorations. So, so what were we talking about?
So let me ask you this. Let me just interject here. So, because you brought this up, so warm composite, you're not putting your bulk filling.
Oh yeah. Which composite do I use? Yes. Yeah. Okay. So here's the deal. Depth of cure is a real problem in back teeth because it's hard to get the light in a molar. Right. So they say, oh, you have to layer for depth of cure. Almost every dental school is still teaching layering. Now, there's a few dental schools moving past it. Roseman Dental School, Loma Linda, they've adopted parts of the Bioclear method, and other dental schools are looking at this. Problem is they're kind of stuck with the old prep, but they're getting away from layering because they know it's wrong. It creates a weaker restoration. So I need 5 millimeter depth of cure. Okay. So I'm going to use a bulk fill. Standard composites only have 2 millimeters depth of cure. So you have to layer, which you don't want to layer. It's the wrong thing to do. So I've got to have a bulk fill for 5 millimeter depth of cure. So even in the deepest preps, I'm only going to put 2 layers, a little bit of flowable on the bottom. And then once I get to 5 millimeters total depth, boom, I can injection mold the whole thing. So I got to have a bulk fill. So let's back up. Most of these bulk fills are ugly. Now, George, why are the bulk fills ugly? Because they had to make them translucent to get the depth of cure. And the problem is the inside of a tooth is usually dark. So a lot of these bulk fills are ugly. They're kind of grainy. They're kind of weak. They didn't do a very good job designing these bulk fills. So 3M built their second generation of, it's called Filtech 1. It has transitional translucency. So what happens is as it cures, it gets more opaque. So I used to have patients complain about the other bulk fills that I use, including the old Filtech bulk fill. But now that it's a lot more opaque because it has transitional translucency, it's kind of cool. The teeth are not ugly. They look pretty. So I get to my cake and eat it too. So I can have 5 millimeter depth of cure, and I get a composite that has pretty good shine retention and decent aesthetics. I don't have to apologize for it or have patients complaining, right? Nothing like working your butt off and having the patient come back and gripe about the procedure not looking pretty enough, you know?
I think we've all had that. But you're putting these in warm, right? So is the warm just so you can control the material, or are there other benefits to that as well?
We're going to flow this composite to an infinity edge. When you injection mold the Clark Class 2, it doesn't stop at the line angle. It flows all the way out to the edge of the matrix. So we're ensconcing a tooth and having this infinity edge flow out. There's no way on earth that you're going to get it to flow. Not only do we heat it, we put adhesive in first as a surfactant, we air thin it, and then hot flow, and then hot paste. Now, you can't do this with the metal matrix because you can't get the flow. It's not curved enough. You can't get the light in there. You can't see what you're doing. So a metal matrix kind of kills the mission because you're kind of stuck with boxes. So if we're going to go around the tooth, and we've done volumetric studies, the restoration is almost twice as big as a normal class 2 because it goes in sconces, right? So to get the composite, we not only do we have to have heated paste, we heat the flowable. So we use adhesive as a surfactant, we air thin that, hot flow, hot paste, and then you're able to take it out to an infinity edge. So we're not only heating the paste, George, we're heating the flowable.
So when you so you're of course this is an all day or a weekend course we're talking about. We're kind of jamming it all down
That's what we
to a
do.
couple minutes here, but um, technique sounds like everything here. So I'm assuming when this is all said and done, polishing is a really important part of this whole thing.
Well, actually, you let the matrix do most of the work. So I
Really?
developed a whole bunch. Yeah, I patented all these anterior matrices. You kind of let a lot of the interproximal alone. So your job is to kind of blend in the infinity edge, but our job is to let the matrix do a lot of the work for us. So these Bioclear matrices, they don't look like metal. It's like it's a tooth form, and that's why it's all patented, right? You literally put a black triangle matrix on a tooth, injection mold it, slide the matrix off. There's not much to do. But yeah, no, but the sculpting and polishing is one of the 5 principles. Yes.
So it's more or less a sectional type matrix, I would think.
See,
Is that not a good description? I'm not familiar with it. So
sectional matrix is like a little kidney bean, right? These are
Yeah.
anatomic tooth forms.
Okay,
It's shaped like a tooth.
that's good stuff.
Yeah, it's hard to do. And they said it couldn't be done. They said you couldn't take mylar and put shape in it. And we figured a way to do that. So, so the goal is, instead of monkeying around trying to carve a tooth with a burr and a disc, let's have something that's actually shaped like a tooth. So I don't like to call it a sectional matrix. It's an anatomic tooth form. One on the mesial, one on the distal, they overlap, gun it in there, boom, you can do crowns.
Wow.
Now, here's the next thing, George. Do you know how much of the tooth we cut away to do a full crown? I'll just skip to the chase.
Too much.
76% of the tooth goes away. What's the pulpal death rate after a crown? 20%. Those are some pretty harsh numbers. We take away 76% of the tooth to do a crown. The pulp's going to die 20% of the time. So if we could injection overmold teeth that are on the border, wouldn't that be cool? Nobody
Yes.
wants a crown. Here's the good news. Once you get good at this, I charge basically crown fees for these rejuvenation cases. So somebody comes in and has a bunch of black triangles. I charge $1,200 per black triangle. You got a mouthful of, you got a maxillary arch of 5 black triangles, it's $6,000. Now, you got to take your time. We spend time to do this. It's a quality procedure, but it makes things possible that we couldn't do before.
So a couple of things. We'll come back to the black triangle in a minute. So really what you're, some people would think of maybe crown lay as a term that's thrown out there for these type of Bioclear restorations in place of a crown, where you're just removing, obviously the decay, the existing restoration, and you're just minimally doing the flare, similar to the
yeah, we call it injection overmolding. And generally the tooth is going to grow a little bit. So it's additive dentistry a lot of the time. The tooth gets a little bit bigger. We can either do cut and paste dentistry or we can do additive dentistry. So we're just very upfront and honest. Your tooth is going to grow a little bit.
Wow. And I know you have a whole course on black triangles. It's an entire course. But what are some of the most important principles people need to keep in mind if they're going to tackle something like that?
Well, number one is that Bioclear is not for babies. Okay, it's not for babies. If you don't want to wear loops, if you just want to just get in and get out in a hurry, just do crowns, right? You still have to have some discipline to do Bioclear. So we have a recipe. You really ought to follow the steps. People say, oh, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to blast the tooth. I'm not going to put disclosing on there because that seems stupid. I'm just going to use a pumice in a cup or whatever, right? Or whatever it is. So if you're going to do this, watch some YouTube videos, take some time, slow down, man. Slow down so you can hurry up. One of my dental school instructors says, David, slow down so you can hurry up. So you got to slow down and then you get to hurry up. At the end of the day, injection molding is faster than layering. But like everything else, invest in yourself, spend a little time and slow down. Don't worry about making money the first couple times and get really comfortable with it. And then with repetition's the mother of learning. So there's certain disciplines, that you really need to do with Bioclear. And my advice is to slow down a little bit in the beginning and invest in yourself.
No doubt about it. That's always great advice. When you how are you building these out if you're going to do a sort of a BioClear posterior crown replacement, if you would?
Yeah. Well, there's two or three different billing models. There's a Canadian model, which the Canadians can do anything they want. Good for them, right? So what the Canadians do, it's awesome up there, is the Canadians will build the insurance company and then they'll add a upgrade fee to that. Now you do that on Delta Dental, they'll okay. So they're Delta Dental. If you do that to any insurance company, they're going to scream and holler and say, no, you can't do that. But in Canada, you can bill them for a 4-surface composite, and then the patient pays a upgrade fee. Okay, that's going to vary depending. And a lot of people, their BioClear fees start to get close to their crown fees. In my office, it's exactly the same as a crown fee. If a kid walks in with first time decay, it's an MOL, right? But you do it beautifully. You build your muscles. And then when you do a composite replacement where there's like busted cusp or something, then all of a sudden we have alt benefit codes like a Botox code, or it's a D299 alt benefit code. And the patient says, I don't want a crown. I'll pay a little extra and let's do this other thing, right? We have all these brochures to talk about the difference between doing a crown and doing injection overmolding. And then so there's different ways to do it. But if it's a super conservative first time decay, just do an amazing injection molded class 2 and feel good that you did something that's going to be a lot better for the patient long term. But when the old restoration busts, and if the guy down the street would do a crown is easy, man. A trained monkey can do a crown these days. Okay, I mean, I don't mean to insult the monkey or anything, right? But there's not a lot of skill set in crowns, and crowns are kind of all the same. I mean, but with Bioclear, you've got to kind of do some work. So I'll tell them, hey, I can do a crown. The guy down the street would do a crown, but this tooth is pretty busted up. It's going to take special time, and so it's going to be $800, $900, $1,200 to do a rejuvenation of this. We like the word rejuvenate of this posterior tooth. And so, so to answer your question, for simple stuff, it's a 3-surface composite. But when something busts, and the guy down the street would do a crown, that's when I stomp my foot and say, yeah, I can do a crown. I'll smoke some enamel. I got no problem with that. I have this other thing. And George, here's my advice: always give them the crappy, expensive, invasive option first. That's the psychology of choice. Always give them the crappy, expensive, invasive option, i.e. a crown. I mean, I don't mean to disparage crowns. We need crowns.
Sure. But
I say, I can do that. And everyone just always done that in the past. I have this new thing. But always give them the expensive, invasive option first, tell them the cost, and then this other option starts sounding real good. It's the psychology of choice. Like I wrote a book about it, but now you get the crib notes on that, okay?
Absolutely. That makes it makes so much sense, right? Yeah.
Yeah. But you have to have a little photo. You got to talk about the value. It gets branded as Bioclear, and because it's not $200 to take a tooth with a busted cusp and injection overmold. That's what they're doing right now on day 2 of the posterior courses. Now we're going to cuspal overlays and complex stuff.
So the Bioclear, the matrices come in different sizes. They must, right?
Yeah, it goes all the way from 5 to 10.
Okay.
And there's a premolar, there's a curvy molar, there's a flatter molar, and all these really other cool stuff. All to allow the composite to go around the tooth, to create beautiful shapes without having to do it by hand. And you got to let the light in. So doing it with metal just
it's an absolute no-go. You talked about blaster. So what are you talking about? Titanium dioxide?
No, so it's aluminum. It's aluminum
oxide.
So aluminum trihydroxide. Aluminum oxide is what we use to make holes in teeth and to sandblast our crowns. Aluminum trihydroxide, which we use in the blaster, is 40 times softer than aluminum oxide. And so John Coyce has always been a big advocate for blasting, but he uses aluminum oxide. And I talked to John about that, and I said, hey, that's great. It's kind of like giving a guy a haircut with the chainsaw, because aluminum oxide, if you use it inside the tooth, you're going to have accidental pulp exposures. So aluminum trihydroxide is the same hardness of dentin. Aluminum oxide is 40 times harder. So John's kind of playing around with using aluminum trihydroxide. Now it's slower for sure, but before a crown preparation or whatever, because it's the same hardness as dentin, it doesn't eat the tooth up. When you're using aluminum oxide, for example, to blast a tooth before you put a crown on, it's going to kind of eat the margins, because aluminum oxide is really hard. It eats enamel. So you got to be really careful with aluminum oxide. So George, either one will get you there. So you can use like a ProfiJet, but this is for us is a better version of ProfiJet, because ProfiJets are kind of clunky. ProfiJets have always used aluminum trihydroxide, 40 times softer than aluminum oxide, which you have in air abrasion or any of these air abrasion units or the little micro etcher in your lab. They're both excellent modalities.
And I'm sure it goes without saying rubber dam is crucial in this.
Well, yeah, I don't want to turn everybody off, but yeah, we like rubber dams.
I think it's important for sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. How about bonding? How about bonding? You spoke, and then I know we don't have a lot of time left, and we'll go through this real quick because there's some other things I want to ask you. But because a lot of this has to do with the overlay, what kind of bonding protocol are you using for when you put these on?
There's a lot of good adhesives out there. One thing that I do like a self-etching adhesive because it makes my life simpler. But even if I'm using a self-etching adhesive, I still want to do a total etch. Because if you've got enamel, you need to acid etch it, period, right? Not using acid etch on enamel is like, geez, it's amazing. So yeah, so I like a one bottle system. I think there's way too much conversation about adhesive generally, and finally people are not talking so much about bonding agents because man, those lectures weren't they so boring? Most of it's going to be fine. So I use Scotch Bond Universal Plus. I like a single bottle because it's just less morbidity, less stuff going on, and I do total etch. And we have two different kinds of adhesion, George. We have bonding to dentin and bonding enamel, which are unrelated. So when we bond to dentin, we have a new conversation, George. It's called co-curing and pre-curing. So it's CO-cure, co-cure. So but with traditional adhesion on dentin, you etch and you massage the adhesive into dentin tubules for either 5 seconds or 20 seconds, depending on the manufacturer. You air thin and you cure. That's traditional adhesion on dentin, and that's called pre-curing. When you do a porcelain veneer, for example, and it's all on enamel, you etch the enamel, you etch the porcelain, you put adhesive on the enamel, you put adhesive on the porcelain, you air thin it, you put some flowable composite basically in the veneer, and you shove it on there. It's a sandwich technique. You are co-curing. You are co-curing the adhesive on the enamel and the composite at the same time. So we can co-cure enamel adhesion, but on dentin, you have to pre-cure it because dentin is fussy. So when you're curing adhesive on dentin, you have to let the adhesive cure on its own before you disturb it. So we'll pre-cure the dentin, we'll pre-cure the adhesive on the dentin, but then when we injection mold, it's always the same, George. Adhesive as a surfactant, air thin, hot flow, hot paste, 1, 2, 3 every time. And we have 50 years of co-curing where we have porcelain veneers bonded to porcelain where we don't cure the adhesive independently. So we have a new conversation when it comes to adhesion, pre-curing and co-curing. We pre-cure on the dentin like we did in the old days, and we co-cure on the enamel. That allows the composite to flow to infinity edge. If you don't put adhesive down as a surfactant first, you'll never get the infinity edge flow. Your x-rays on your black triangles, you'll see a little void. You see a line there. So it's using resin in a really different way. That's a lot. You asked me a question, George, and then 5 minutes goes by. You're going to learn that.
Yes, I know that. You know what? And I wanted to leave a little time to talk about your center because you've got a fantastic center up in Tacoma, Washington, and you give so many great courses up there, several different courses, hands-on, and 6 to 7 hours a day of actual hands-on learning and things like that, right? So tell me a little bit about the center that you have up there.
So what we wanted to create was a place for people that were all in. It's like, okay, I want to learn all of it. I want to be able to handle the tough cases. And when you come for a multiple day course, like even today after yesterday, their brains are like more calm. They're really understanding it today. Day one is, but then by day 4, you are on fire. On day 4, they're going to injection overmold 6 apple core teeth. Those apple core front teeth that look like, apple cores. They're going to do 6 of those at a time. They're going to do 6 teeth, do arch form, disking, rockstar polish, and convert these scraggly teeth into gorgeous, 360-degree wrapped Bioclear veneers. And so we built the learning center for a total immersive experience. Because once you say, okay, I want to go around the tooth. I don't want to cut old-fashioned preps. I want to learn how to do the tough cases. I want to learn to someday open the vertical dimension. And I want somebody to hold my hand the whole way. And I want a recipe. And I don't want to have to track crap down on the internet. I just want everything handed to me. Okay? Because that's the way that I like to learn, right? So we set this up and they're super intensive. There's only 15 doctors at a time. We've got 2 faculty and people. We feed you and give you cocktails at the end of the day, but it's total immersion. You talk to anybody who's been to the Learning Center, they're going to say 2 things, right? They're going to go, there was way more there than I bargained for, right? And number 2, they're going to say, the food is really awesome.
I heard it's widely known for an immersive, fun really
Yeah.
great learning environment, right? I mean, you really
And it's
take great good care of the
Yeah,
folks.
and everybody screws stuff up. So we create kind of a safe environment where we go, hey, everybody's going to crash their bike. Everyone's going to make mistakes along the way. So don't feel bad about it. It's part of learning. And so we have some really very caring, wonderful faculty. Man, these doctors are amazing. They're so kind. They're so
Yeah,
kind. We have a culture of kindness, right? It's hard to learn. It's hard to go somewhere and not be good at something as an adult.
for
So
sure.
we've tried to create that environment here.
For sure. And I also know you're going to be up in Montreal July 9th through 12th at AGD 2025. So we're really happy to have you come up and visit us up there as well.
Yeah. Now remind me, what are we doing up there? Are we doing a lecture, or hands-on, or both?
I believe you're doing a lecture. I don't have that in front of me right now, but I believe you're doing a lecture. And the other thing I saw on your website was that you have your learning center, but you also have some opportunities to take this around the country as well, right?
Yeah.
So
So
Anaheim, Nashville, Port Richey, Salt Lake City, things like that.
the black triangle thing is so fun, and everybody sees black triangles. Anybody doing Invisalign, they're everywhere. And black triangles is like the gateway drug to Bioclear because injection overmolding with this beautiful, amazingly curved matrix to get rid of black triangles is so powerful. And so we have a full day on doing a Bioclear certification class. When you're done, once you submit your cases, you become certified. And then, so those are 1 day courses we teach around the Canada and the US. It's a total immersive experience for a full day, but instead of having to come to Tacoma, we set it up around the country, and those are really popular. But it said those are very intimate classes, maximum about 20 doctors, and you're going to go learn all about lowers, uppers, and then covering cervical abrasions and a root overlay because it's a little bit more complicated. So we have these black triangle certification classes that you're talking about around the country. And then we have other like sort of mini intro courses that are remote and some other stuff. But what you're talking about is these new, it's kind of a road show of Black Triangle certification. And we pick about 8 cities around North America to do those.
It's really great that you can bring that out. And for those that want to find out what David's teaching up in Montreal, registration is open for AGD 2025. So you can go on agd2025.org and find that information and see how you can get some really fantastic education. Share with us your contact information and how folks can get a hold of you, how they can find out about your courses, how they can sign up. Share that with us, David, if you would.
Okay, probably the easiest thing to do at this point because of short notice is you can either go to the Bioclear Matrix website and they'll have like a contact us page and you could ask for information, or the safest bet is just to email me and I'll pass it along. They can email me at drclark@bioclearmatrix.com. So drclark@bioclearmatrix.com. And that's a great way to find out about, if you have questions about cases or whatever, or about courses, I can forward it on to our education department. So they can either email me or they can go right to the Bioclear Matrix website. And there's a portal there that'll take you, whether it's education or product stuff, to somebody that you can talk to.
Excellent. Great website. I've been on it. It's really easy to navigate and a lot of great information on there. David, thank you so much for coming on and sharing, spending some time with us here. I know you're really busy. You're actually doing a course right now. And you told me you're going to Korea, I guess, in 2 days to train some folks over there. But really appreciate you taking some time out of your busy schedule to be with us today.
Hey, George, really fun. You asked a lot of great questions. It kind of makes me rethink, now, what am I doing?
Yeah,
So,
exactly. Exactly. We'd also like to thank our producer, Kristen Gover. So if you like what you heard, please like and subscribe to our channel. You can always find us on the AGD app, SoundCloud, and Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. And if you have any questions, concerns, comments, or suggestions, contact us at news@agd.org. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.